On the 17th of January, 1986, Antonio Carlos Mendes, 32, and his wife Márcia Regina Oliveira, 28, embarked on a journey from Conceição do Araguaia in the south of Pará. Their vessel was a small boat, their destination a voyage down the majestic Araguaia River. He was an agronomist deeply involved in rural development projects throughout the region. She was a biology teacher who had moved from Rio de Janeiro 2 years earlier to be with her husband. The couple was celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary with a trip on the river they both so admired, planning to navigate to Bananal Island, the largest river island in the world. That summer, Brazil was in the nascent years of its new republic. The Cruzado Plan, an ambitious economic strategy, had just been implemented, and a fragile sense of optimism filled the air. It was a stark contrast to the lingering tensions from the military dictatorship, the so-called years of lead. In the Araguaia region, which less than 15 years earlier had been the stage for a brutal guerrilla war, life flowed on. Caught between the push for agricultural development and the preservation of timeless river traditions. January 17th dawned with a clear sky and a temperature of 34.8 degrees Celsius, typical for an Amazonian summer. According to witnesses, Antônio and Márcia left the small port of Conceição do Araguaia at 7:40 in the morning, in a 16-foot launch powered by a 40-horsepower motor. They carried provisions for 5 days, fishing and photography equipment, and a diary that Márcia kept religiously. The last person to see them was Joaquim Ferreira, a 67-year-old local fisherman who helped them load their gear. They were happy, making plans, Joaquim later recounted in his first statement to the authorities. Dona Márcia even took a picture of me helping with the bags. Dr. Antonio told me they would be back the following Wednesday and would bring me a big fish. At 11:23 that same morning, the couple made radio contact with the base of the IBDF, the precursor to Ibama, in São Félix do Araguaia, approximately 120 kilometers downriver. They reported that they were navigating without any problems and planned to spend the night camped on Taquari Beach, a spot well known to the local river dwellers. This was the last registered communication from the couple. When they failed to return as planned on January 22nd, Antonio's brother José Roberto Mendes, who lived in Conceição do Araguaia, notified the authorities of their disappearance. The federal police, military police, and the fire department immediately began their search, aided by local fishermen and indigenous people who knew the region intimately. But Brazil in 1986 faced technological and logistical limitations that hampered the operation. The Araguaia River, with its 2,627 kilometers of winding channels, its hundreds of beaches, islands, and tributaries, presented a monumental challenge. To make matters worse, the search coincided with the start of the seasonal rains, which swelled the river and complicated operations even further. After 5 days of intense searching, on January 27th, the couple's launch was found. It was beached on a sandbank near the confluence of the Araguaia and the Rio das Mortes, roughly 180 kilometers from where they had started. The boat was empty. There were no signs of violence or structural damage. Their personal belongings, including documents, money, and camera equipment, were gone. The engine was off but still had fuel, suggesting no mechanical failure. The launch was perfectly preserved as if it had been deliberately left there, stated lead detective Humberto Meireles at the time. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing to indicate an accident or a violent crime. The absence of concrete evidence opened the door to a flood of theories. Was it an accident during a swim? A fatal encounter with smugglers who used the river as a route? An attack by wild animals? Or had Antonio and Márcia somehow stumbled upon a secret of the region, a secret that put them in mortal danger. The Mendes and Oliveira families moved to Conceição do Araguaia to follow the search up close. Posters with the couple's photos were spread throughout the region. The case captured the national media's attention, featured on major news programs with the headline, "The Araguaia mystery couple vanishes without a trace." With the discovery of the launch, the police investigation intensified. Detective Humberto Meireles established an operational base in São Félix do Araguaia, a strategic point to coordinate the search. The case was classified as a disappearance under suspicious circumstances, and 3 primary lines of investigation were established. The first hypothesis was a natural accident. The Araguaia, for all its beauty, hides dangers: treacherous currents, whirlpools, and animals like caimans and piranhas. A technical report from the Navy, issued in February 1986, noted that river conditions during the week of the disappearance presented a moderate risk, with an above-average current due to the first seasonal rains. This theory suggested the couple might have stopped to swim and been swept away. The second line of investigation pointed to a crime. In the mid-1980s, the Araguaia region was notorious for land conflicts, illegal mining, and drug trafficking. In certain stretches, the Araguaia was a kind of lawless land, Detective Meireles explained in an interview. "We had information that Antônio Carlos, as an agronomist, had been involved in disputes over land demarcation." This theory gained traction on February 12th, when a local fisherman, José Ribamar, told police he had seen a launch similar to the couple's being approached by a larger boat with 3 men aboard on the afternoon of January 17th. However, when brought in for photographic identification, Ribamar could not be certain, partially weakening his testimony. The third hypothesis, initially considered the least probable, was a voluntary disappearance. This theory emerged when police discovered that Antonio had taken out a substantial life insurance policy 6 months earlier, with Márcia as the beneficiary. Furthermore, documents found in their apartment revealed they had both applied for new passports in December 1985. "We thoroughly investigated the possibility of a hoax," stated Detective Meireles, "but the psychological profiles provided by family and colleagues did not support this theory." Both Antonio and Márcia were respected professionals with no history of serious financial problems or erratic behavior. In March 1986, the investigation suffered a significant setback. A severe flood inundated the region, drastically altering the landscape where the launch had been found. Potentially crucial evidence was washed away, and the search had to be temporarily suspended. When the waters receded in April, an intriguing discovery was made. About 3 kilometers from where the launch was found, fishermen discovered a camera partially damaged by water. Forensic analysis confirmed it was Márcia's Nikon FM2 camera. The film inside was hopelessly ruined, but the find rekindled hope that other belongings might be located. This discovery prompted police to re-examine the area with greater scrutiny. On May 7, 1986, during a sweep, they found a man's Topper brand sneaker, identified by the family as belonging to Antonio, and loose waterlogged pages from a notebook that appeared to be from Márcia's diary. Unfortunately, the writing was illegible. The discovery of these items in scattered locations far from each other and from the launch only complicated the puzzle. If it was an accident, why were their belongings so spread out? If it was a crime, why would the perpetrators leave evidence behind? In June 1986, police received a disturbing statement from Pedro Assumpção, a prospector working in the area. He claimed that on the night of January 17th, he heard the distant screams of a man and a woman coming from the river while he was camped near Ilha das Garças. "I thought it was people celebrating, maybe drunk fishermen, so I didn't pay much attention," he declared. Only when I heard about the disappearance weeks later did I make the connection. Pedro's credibility was questioned when it was discovered he had a criminal record for fraud and had given false testimony in other cases. However, his precise description of the location, which coincided with the couple's likely route, kept his statement in the case file. As the months passed, the trail grew cold. In August 1986, an anonymous tip claimed the couple had been seen in Belém, preparing to leave the country. A swift operation was mounted, but it turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. By the end of 1986, with limited resources and few concrete leads, the active investigation began to wind down. Detective Mireles was transferred, and the case fell to a successor who did not share his predecessor's drive. The families, however, did not give up. They hired a private investigator, Oswaldo Junqueira, who pursued the case for the next 3 years. Junqueira developed a fourth theory, that the couple had been silenced after witnessing illicit activity. The Araguaia region at that time was a smuggling route for various goods, including gold and indigenous artifacts. Junqueira explained in his final report, "It's possible that Antônio and Márcia, both with cameras, recorded something they shouldn't have seen." This theory was never confirmed, but it remained a persistent possibility in a case that was gradually fading from the headlines. In the years that followed, the disappearance of the Mendes Oliveira couple became one of Brazil's great unsolved mysteries. In 1994, an anthropologist researching Carajá communities in the Araguaia region found oral histories about the couple from the launch. The stories told of a man and woman who knew too much about the river's secrets and were taken by the waters at the request of powerful people. The accounts were considered too mythical to be a concrete lead, but they brought new attention to the case. In 2001, with advances in forensic technology, the federal police officially reopened the case. Specialists managed to partially recover the damaged negative from Márcia's camera. The images were extremely degraded, mostly showing landscapes and happy photos of the couple. However, the very last frame, though barely legible, showed what appeared to be a distant boat. It seemed to have been photographed covertly from an angle suggesting Márcia did not want to be seen. This image could indicate that the couple really did witness something they shouldn't have, declared forensic expert Carolina Almeida. The boat in the photo was a common cargo type, but no further details could be discerned. Then in 2005, a bombshell. Manuel Neco Silveira, a disgraced former military police officer, gave a deathbed confession. He claimed the couple had been murdered for photographing an arms trafficking operation on the river. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, Neco allegedly told the hospital chaplain who heard his confession, adding that their bodies were buried on a farm. Neco died before he could provide a precise location, and his history of psychiatric disorders cast a long shadow of doubt over his story. The last flicker of a lead came in 2012, when a fisherman found remnants of clothing caught in submerged roots. But due to the material's degradation, DNA tests were inconclusive. The river, it seemed, was determined to keep its secrets. To this day, the fate of Antônio and Márcia remains an enigma, a story of love and adventure that dissolved into one of Brazil's most profound and enduring mysteries. Between 2013 and 2023, the case remained technically open, but with few significant developments. The families continued their tireless search for answers, keeping the memory of Antônio and Márcia alive through a foundation created in their name, which funded searches for missing persons in Brazil. It was in January of 2024, exactly 38 years after the disappearance, that an extraordinary event brought the case back into the spotlight. A historic flood struck the Araguaia River, the largest in 5 decades according to the National Institute of Meteorology. In some stretches, the waters rose 12 meters above their normal level, inundating areas rarely touched by seasonal floods. On January 22, 2024, Jose Cardoso, a 43-year-old fisherman, was navigating near a region known as Mata Azul, about 200 kilometers from where the couple had vanished. It was then he spotted something unusual floating in the water: partially burned photographs, protected inside a deteriorated plastic container that had been dislodged by the force of the current. "I thought it was strange seeing those old photos floating by," Cardozo recounted. "When I picked up the container and saw they were burned at the edges but with faces still visible, I got a chill. I remembered the stories my father used to tell about the couple who disappeared on the river when I was just a child." Jose handed his discovery over to the police in São Félix do Araguaia, who immediately recognized the potential importance of the find. The photographs, 17 in all, were sent to the Forensics Institute in Brasilia for analysis. The result was stunning. They were, without a doubt, photos of the Mendes Oliveira couple. Some were already known to the families, but others were new, taken during that fateful 1986 trip. Among them were 3 particularly significant images which showed a clearly illicit operation: men unloading boxes from a larger vessel onto smaller boats at a remote point on the river. Never give up on the truth if you believe that all the missing deserve to be found. Leave a comment if you agree. The discovery of the burned photographs floating in the Araguaia, 38 years after the disappearance, revolutionized the case. The federal police, under the command of Delegate Rodrigo Moraes, established a task force dedicated exclusively to analyzing the new material and revisiting all previous evidence. Case file Barima 7883-1986, which had been relegated to the cold case archive, was given new priority. The photographs found by Jose Cardoso proved to be fundamental pieces of the puzzle. Digital forensic analysis, using technologies unavailable in previous decades, managed to recover stunning details from the partially burned images. "What we have here," explained forensic expert Ana Luisa Montenegro at a press conference on February 15, 2024, "is a photographic record of a smuggling operation carried out on January 18, 1986. One day after the couple's initial disappearance. The images clearly show a group of 6 men unloading wooden crates with military inscriptions from one vessel to another. Using comparative facial recognition techniques, forensics identified 3 of the 6 men in the photographs. Among them was Joaquim Silveira, known as Quincas, a notorious smuggler who operated in the region during the 1980s and 90s, and who had died in a shootout with police in 2011. Even more surprising was the identification of Lieutenant Colonel Augusto Rocha, an Army officer who in 1986 was serving in the region on border security operations. The third man identified was Roberto Esteves, a former federal police officer who had been dismissed from the force in 1989 for corruption. These identifications confirm the hypothesis of an illicit operation involving military personnel and corrupt agents, exactly as Detective Junquera suspected back in the 1980s, stated Delegate Moraes. "We believe the Mendes Oliveira couple witnessed and photographed this operation, likely without being initially detected." The geographical location where the photos were taken was also determined by analyzing landscape elements visible in the images and comparing them with geological maps. It was an area known as Volta Grande, a meander of the Araguaia River located approximately 30 kilometers from where the couple's motorboat had been found in 1986. The dates on the photographs, confirmed by forensic analysis of the film type and development process, indicated they were taken between the afternoon of January 17th and the morning of January 18th, 1986. This suggested the couple had survived for at least a day after their last official contact with the IBDF base. The plastic container where the photos were found also provided valuable clues. It was a waterproof capsule, the type used by professional photographers to protect equipment. Residual DNA analysis from inside the capsule identified genetic material compatible with Márcia Oliveira, suggesting she had handled the photographs and deliberately stored them. Our hypothesis, Delegate Moraes explained, is that Márcia, realizing the danger they were in after witnessing the illicit operation, hid the most compromising photographs in this capsule. The fact that they were partially burned suggests an attempt at destruction that was not completed. Based on this new evidence, the federal police, in conjunction with the Federal Public Ministry, launched an operation in March 2024 codenamed Submerged Memory. Search and seizure warrants were executed at addresses linked to the surviving suspects, including the country house of Roberto Esteves in Caldas Novas, Goiás. During the search of Esteves's property, investigators found a safe buried under the floor of a shed in the backyard. Inside were incriminating documents, including a diary where Esteves had recorded detailed smuggling operations carried out between 1985 and 1988. In an entry dated January 18, 1986, he wrote, "Serious problem today. Tourist couple photographed the operation at Volta Grande. LC identified the boat as the same one he saw at the port 2 days ago. TCR ordered interception. Situation resolved, but we need to change routes. Material proceeds to destination tomorrow." This entry, though coded, provided concrete evidence of the fatal encounter between the criminal group and the Mendes Oliveira couple. Roberto Esteves, now 72, was arrested on April 5, 2024. Confronted with the evidence, he decided to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. In a deposition given on April 10th, Esteves revealed the shocking details of what happened on that January day in 1986. "We were unloading contraband from Bolivia, mainly weapons and gold. Lieutenant Colonel Rocha was commanding the operation as part of a scheme involving corrupt military officers. Quincas spotted a motorboat stopped behind an island about 300 meters away. When we got closer, we realized there was a couple photographing the operation. According to Esteves, Lieutenant Colonel Rocha ordered the capture of the couple and the seizure of their photographic material. Antônio and Márcia were taken to an isolated farm known as Retiro Novo, located about 40 kilometers from the river, where they were held for 2 days while the group decided what to do. Rocha wanted to eliminate them immediately, Esteves recounted, but we needed to be sure they hadn't told anyone what they saw. We interrogated them separately. The man, Antonio, insisted they were just tourists, that they didn't know what they were photographing. The woman, Márcia, was smarter. She tried to negotiate. She said she would hand over all the film in exchange for their freedom. According to Esteves, on January 20th, after an intense debate among the group's members, Rocha made the final decision. The couple would be eliminated and their bodies made to disappear. The execution was carried out that same night by Quincas and another accomplice known only as Baixinho, who was never identified. "I didn't witness the execution," Esteves stated. "I stayed at the farmhouse. When they came back, Quincas said it was done and that the bodies were buried in a dense wooded area at the back of the property. The photographs were supposed to have all been burned, but apparently some were preserved by Márcia and hidden before her death." Based on this testimony, the federal police, with support from the Brazilian army, conducted a search operation at the old Retiro Novo farm, now abandoned and partially reclaimed by vegetation. After 5 days of intense searching with the help of georadar and sniffer dogs, on April 22, 2024, human remains were found in a dense thicket, approximately 800 meters from the main farmhouse. Preliminary forensic analysis confirmed they were two human skeletons, one male and one female, with characteristics consistent with Antônio and Márcia. Both skulls showed perforations consistent with firearm shots. DNA tests were underway for definitive confirmation, using samples provided by the families. The Federal Public Ministry formally charged Roberto Esteves with aggravated murder and concealment of a corpse. Although Lieutenant Colonel Augusto Rocha had passed away in 2017, his name was included in the proceedings for the historical record. A third party involved, identified only as Baixinho in Esteves's testimony, remains at large. For the Mendes and Oliveira families, the discoveries brought an end to a 38-year cycle of anguish and uncertainty. We always knew something terrible had happened, but living without concrete answers was a daily torment for almost 4 decades, declared Maria Helena Mendes, Antonio's sister, at a press conference. The case of the Araguaia couple, as it became known, illustrates the complex interactions between organized crime and institutional corruption in post-dictatorship Brazil, as well as the challenges faced by the justice system in cases involving powerful figures. The discovery of the burned photographs, preserved for 38 years in the waters of the Araguaia, demonstrates how the truth, no matter how one tries to suppress it, finds a way to surface. The legacy of Antônio Carlos Mendes and Márcia Regina Oliveira lives on through the foundation that bears their names, which continues to assist families of the disappeared in Brazil. In June 2024, the National Congress passed the Mendes Oliveira Law, establishing new protocols and resources for investigating disappearances in remote areas of the country. The waters of the Araguaia, which had held secrets for so long, finally allowed the truth to float to the surface, bringing justice, however late, to Antônio and Márcia. If you have listened this far, it is because you care about these cases that scar families forever. Let me know you're here by leaving a comment saying, "Oh, I listened to the end," so I can know who truly cares about the search for truth. Don't forget to like this video and share it so that more people can learn about this incredible story of a quest for justice that spanned nearly 4 decades. The Mendes Oliveira case officially closed in July 2024, with the DNA confirmation that positively identified the remains found at the old Retiro Novo farm, left a profound legacy on the Brazilian justice system and the country's collective memory. Roberto Esteves, the only survivor of the criminal group identified in the photographs, was sentenced in September 2024 to 30 years in prison for double aggravated homicide and concealment of a corpse. Due to his advanced age and cooperation with the investigation, he was granted the right to serve his sentence in a semi-open regime. During the trial, further revelations came to light about the extent of the smuggling operation that operated on the Araguaia in the 1980s. It was a sophisticated operation involving military personnel, police officers, and smugglers, taking advantage of the vastness of the territory and the region's isolation, explained prosecutor Daniela Sampaio during the trial. The contraband ranged from weapons and ammunition to gold illegally mined in the Amazon. The involvement of authorities guaranteed protection for the scheme and hampered any investigation. The investigation led to the reopening of other archived cases from the same period and region. In November 2024, the Commission on Political Deaths and Disappearances included the Mendes Oliveira case in its special report on human rights violations in the post-dictatorship period, officially recognizing that even after the formal end of the military regime in 1985, structures of repression and corruption continued to operate in the country. The photographs recovered from the Araguaia River were incorporated into the collection of the Memorial of Resistance in São Paulo, in a permanent exhibition titled Submerged Truths, Post-Dictatorship Brazil. The exhibition's curator, Professor Carlos Eduardo Santos, explained the historical importance of the material. These images are more than evidence of a crime. They are historical documents that show how the transition to democracy in Brazil was complex and imperfect. They reveal that illicit power structures continued to operate in the early years of the new republic, often with the participation of agents who had served the previous regime. For the residents of the Araguaia region, the case's resolution brought a mixture of relief and sadness. Many elderly people who lived in the area at the time of the disappearance reported that they had always known something was wrong with the official story. Jose Pereira, an 82-year-old retired fisherman who participated in the 1986 searches, stated in an interview with a local newspaper, "We knew something wrong was happening on the river back then. Many people saw strange boat movements at night, but no one said anything out of fear. Those who lived here knew powerful people were involved. Simple folk suffer in silence, but the truth always comes out, even if it takes a long time." The impact on the Mendes and Oliveira families was profound. After nearly 4 decades of uncertainty, they were finally able to hold a funeral for Antônio and Márcia in their hometown of Rio de Janeiro, in a ceremony that brought together hundreds of people. During a solemn ceremony, Maria Helena Mendes, sister of Antônio and the current president of the Mendes Oliveira Foundation, announced an expansion of the organization's mission. "For 38 years, we lived in the darkness of doubt," she declared. "Now, with the truth revealed, our commitment is to ensure that other families never have to wait so long for answers." The foundation will now expand its work, offering free legal assistance to the families of the disappeared and advocating for significant changes in public policies surrounding these cases. The Mendes Oliveira law, recently passed by the National Congress, has already laid the groundwork for this change. It mandates the creation of a national database of disappeared persons, requiring the collection of DNA from family members for future cross-referencing. The law also establishes specialized disappearance units within every state police force and dictates specific protocols for searches in remote and hard-to-reach areas, such as the Amazon region. Building on this momentum, in October of 2024, a multidisciplinary team of forensic archaeologists, historians, and anthropologists began a new project, mapping historical smuggling routes in the Araguaia region. Using the testimony of Esteves and other documents uncovered during the investigation, the project, funded by the Ministry of Justice, aims not only to document the illicit operations of the past, but also to pinpoint potential burial sites of other victims. The Mendes Oliveira case has opened a door for us to better understand a dark period in our recent history, explained Dr. Patricia Nunes, the project's lead archaeologist. "We are discovering that the number of people who vanished in this region during the 1980s and 90s may be significantly higher than official records suggest. For the scientific community, the photographs themselves, recovered after so long underwater, represent an extraordinary feat of evidence preservation." Professor Ricardo Miura, an expert in photographic material conservation from the University of São Paulo, published a detailed study on the matter. He explained that a unique combination of factors allowed the images to survive. The photographs were partially burned, sealed inside a waterproof capsule, and submerged in the Araguaia River, whose specific water chemistry created a one-of-a-kind preservation environment. This allowed crucial information to endure for nearly 4 decades. "It is a rare case," Miura noted, "that teaches us a great deal about forensic preservation in tropical aquatic environments." Investigative journalist Paulo Martins, who had been following the case since 1986, released a book in December 2024, 38 Years of Silence, The Truth That Floated on the Araguaia. It quickly became a national bestseller. The book details not just the case itself, but the systemic failures that allowed the crime to go unpunished for so long. What happened to Antonio and Márcia was not an isolated crime, Martins wrote in his introduction. It was the product of a system that allowed state agents to operate outside the law, protected by a culture of impunity. The photographs that surfaced from the river in 2024 did not just reveal the couple's killers. They exposed the very core of a state still struggling to shed its authoritarian past. In January of 2025, on the 39th anniversary of their disappearance, a commemorative plaque was installed on the banks of the Araguaia River, at the very spot where José Cardozo found the photographs. Its inscription, simple and direct, captures the essence of the case. In memory of Antonio Carlos Mendes and Márcia Regina Oliveira, the truth, like this river, follows its own inexorable course. And so, the Mendes Oliveira case closes as a pivotal chapter in Brazil's recent history. It serves as a powerful reminder that no matter how deeply the truth is buried, it will always find a way to the surface, even if it must float for 38 years on the turbulent waters of a nation's great river. If you've followed the story this far, please consider subscribing to our channel and activating notifications to join us for more incredible cases that have shaped the history of Brazil and the world. Leave a like and share this story with friends who are also drawn to true tales of mystery and justice.